And I know that's been like 10 years in the making, and Fred has extensive experience in dealing with QA for software teams in all kinds of situations. So I can't wait to hear his learnings today. And then we will be able also to make questions to Fred and have a community discussion around it. Oh, I disabled that?
Somebody didn't QA the Zoom.
Yes, I didn't do proper QA for this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been selling a QA platform to startups for 10 years. And in the course of that time, we've helped lots and lots of people. And so this is basically just a summary of some of the key principles that we found work really well. And also some of the key anti-patterns. So first things first, though, a quick title change, right? And, I think this is the first most important thing, right? QA is a weird little sub-industry of engineering, which is kind of like obsessed with testing and functionality. But the actual goal of QA is quality, right? And so there's this interesting distinction here, which is that what we care about as people building software is trying to ship quality products to our customers. And when you think about like the headphones you use, like your phone, your car, your keyboard, right? These things that you choose as a consumer, you're not choosing them because they work, right? That you're choosing them because of this big combination of stuff that makes up this perception of quality. So first of all, why should you listen to me? Well, you maybe shouldn't, but we have had some lessons along the way here. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Rainforest QA. We went through YC in 2012. We've raised about $50 million. And for the first 7 years, we built a crowd testing platform. And actually based on the learnings about like the limitations of that approach and how we weren't actually able to improve quality enough for our customers, we did like a hard pivot. We changed the product, a lot of the team, the go-to-market strategy. And so for the last 3 years, we've been doing no-code automation. Like, this is where my learning comes from about how to do QA. And so, yeah, we've had about 10,000 all-time signups, and it, resolves to today about 350 paying customers. And a lot of those customers we speak to on a weekly basis, helping them figure out how do we move this culture of quality forwards. So, most important thing, 10 years later, what's our key learning? And this is potentially controversial, but yeah, the key learning is QA people can't solve quality. And this is because of the thing I talked about, because at the end of the day, quality is about a mindset of the people that ship software. And the QA people aren't shipping software, right? The people that are shipping software is the product teams, PM, developers, designer. If you don't have the right mindset of caring about and being incentivized around quality with that team, doesn't matter how good your QA team is, you are not going to ship a high quality product. So QA people can't solve quality. That's kind of like assertion one. So basically, after speaking to honestly thousands of different software teams and working with hundreds of them to become successful, we basically got to the point where we saw like a set of common principles, and those kind of common principles are listed here. These are the 6 principles. We're going to look at 3 in depth. And essentially what we realized over time is like, if a team isn't doing one of these things, then their quality is going to suffer. And on the flip side, the most successful quality turnarounds we've seen, the teams are doing all of these things. So first things first, product teams own quality, not QA, and definitely not just devs. So basically, this is about digging into incentives, right? And making sure that you're aligning the incentives and the responsibilities of each role with creating a culture of quality, right? And so just to list through each of these in turn, right? If you think about the product managers succeed in their career when they solve customer problems. Their job is to ship features to improve metrics, ultimately, right? They're synthesizing feedback from lots of different sources, choosing what goes on the roadmap, and choosing when the item that we're currently working on in the sprint gets shipped, right? So at the end of the day, what we've seen is that the product manager is really responsible for quality, in the sense of responsible for deciding when something is ready to ship and when it's going to impact the customer positively. And on the flip side, if you ship something that doesn't work, or that is, broken, or doesn't help the customer, then the product manager is the one who gets the slap, right? It's not the developer, it's not the designer, it's not the QA person, it's the product manager. Developers need to be key stakeholders in quality, but owning quality is a red flag for us, right? When we speak to a VP of engineering, about half the time, this is what we hear. What's the quote on this slide? Oh, our devs own quality. And so what I always say to the VP engineering is like, oh, interesting. So do they do UX testing? And they're like, no, they test the code. And then I'm like, oh, interesting. And so what kind of tests are they doing? Like, well, unit testing, front end, automation. And so I'm like, interesting. So are they thinking about the user experience? And they're like, well, yeah, but it's mostly focused on the code. And so then what I say to them is like, so what you're saying is your devs own code quality, but what about user experience quality? Like, does the customer care how high quality the code is? Like, you could have amazing quality code that passed code review and is very well architected, but nevertheless doesn't solve the problem for the customer of that, right? What our experience has been is you can get a lot more value from less testing if you're trying to test like a human. From our perspective, that means testing via the DOM doesn't make sense, because your user is not opening the browser inspector window and like using the DOM, right? They're not thinking, oh, I should click button ID XYZ123, right? They're like, I'm going to click the sign up button. And so the further you get away from that user experience with your testing, the more risk you create with gap, right? And so that's the second key principle for us: test like a human. Third key principle, too much testing is as bad as too little testing. And so, basically, there's a lot to say here, but essentially, one of the key anti-patterns we see when we go into a team and they're like, help. One of the key anti-patterns we see is that they will have hundreds and hundreds of automated tests. And a large proportion of those tests will be failing or flaky or giving unclear results. And the QA organization's key focus will be on more coverage. And that there are a lot of issues with this idea. And so before we get into the issues, let's just take a step back here. What's the goal? The goal is, let's make sure that we are understanding issues in our user experience before we ship them, right? That's the goal of this whole thing. And driving a culture of quality is about, let's make it as easy as possible to uncover those issues and to make sure those issues don't happen again. I made a stupid midwit meme, which is like a little bit accurate, I think. And it's something that, you can feel free to share.
It's a fantastic meme. It applies to so many things in life anyway.
It really does. It really does.
So we can start with questions. I can break the ice if people allow me to. I took so many notes from this, and I love how you started the talk by saying that basically the good tools are not gonna save you if you have like an organizational process, problem of how you think of testing. I wanted to ask, have you noticed that there are things that change based on the size of the company? I mean, how you should do stuff, whether you are, let's say, a small startup or a larger company?
You could imagine kind of just like a graph of like maturity of the company and, size of test suite, or like, let's say ROI positive size of test suite. That's increasing over time, right? And so, you really should have, our opinion, 5 to 10 end-to-end tests of like the things that you would literally want to page the CEO about if they broke. Yeah. And like, that's kind of like the mental model. Obviously, as your feature set gets bigger, you start to introduce multiple products. Some of those products don't get worked on anymore. Then that story is going to become different.
The answer is always some combination that involves, when the product maturity gets to a level that you are more confident about things staying the same for a longer time, then you should invest more, in making the code more solid, more scalable. You write more testing, and as well, you invest more in automated quality QA and testing as well. Yeah,
exactly.
QA tools cannot exclude PMs or designers. And we have some tests in Cypress, for example. So should we give PMs access to Cypress runs, or how would it work?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting debate. Basically, I would ask if I was you advising, right, what I would say is you should ask the PMs and designers, how can we involve you in this quality process? And then I would also ask yourself, like, how do you choose what gets tested in Cypress?
Yeah, I have a question. Since I love that you talk about quality without QA, like it was specifically just for quality. So I was wondering if you have some insights related to the specific shift left approach that you can apply to the QA team that is kind of really specific for the QA team, I suppose.
Definitely. Yeah. Great question, Michael. Yeah. So I think there's two sides to this. There's kind of like a technical tooling side, and then there's a cultural side. And I personally think the cultural piece is the key issue. And so what we tend to see when we go into organizations with siloed QA teams is basically a class structure within the organization where the engineering team and the QA team are not seen as equivalently valuable.
Do you see a pattern? I mean, that companies that maybe have strong cross-functional product teams do not feel much of this problem. I mean, not as much as companies that are more organized into strong functions and layers around them.
Yeah, 100%. So yes, 100%. I think the added complication is kind of what we're talking about with Michael a little bit, which is that at the end of the day, the big elephant in the room with QA is that most people don't respect the QA people.
You are not using the DOM, right, for the tests, so like text recognition and so on. And what about external events? So for example, new data received or something, how can you test it if you test like a human? That's what you said.
Yeah, I mean, so like as in, when a JavaScript event fires or something like that. Is that what you mean? Yeah, so basically you can, like, how we tell people to test stuff like that is how their users would use it, So yeah, it might be like there's a weather widget and you expect it to change when new weather updates, or, it might be that it's a multiplayer app and, there's chat messages streaming in from one user to the other. So yeah, the role of humans in testing, as in human testers, basically should be when human subjectivity is really important. And so, there's a lot of companies that do like user Zoom and companies like that, right? Where it's like on-demand UX feedback. And like a bot is not going to tell you, oh, this page is so beautiful, right? Whereas like an actual person will. And pleasure. Thanks very much for the opportunity, Luca.
Sure. And we have recorded this conversation, this full event, so we will post the full video on the community for the guys that couldn't make it today. And so check out the community, maybe to continue the conversation there.
Sure.
Join the comments, etc.
Let's get into some flame wars.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, guys. Thank you again. Have a good day.
Thanks very much, guys. Cheers.